Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. And of course, we have ourselves. I'm your host, Stephen Pinecker, by the way, and I want to welcome the co-hostess with the mostest, Rebecca Biblioteca. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Steve. How are you today?
Now, we are now, for the third episode in a row, are wearing sunglasses. And the question is, why are we wearing sunglasses? Well, because whenever we have a superstar come on our program, it's like a Hollywood premiere. We got the paparazzi out and about, and we want to welcome our friend, Carah Burrell, who is the host of NuanceHoe. And also, of course, we all remember her was a former co-host at Mormon Stories as well. Carah, welcome to the program.
Oh, hi, guys. I got my sunglasses for my Hollywood.
Oh, look at that.
Okay, here we go. We've all
I
got
just so happened to have them right next to my computer in a 1 in a million chance.
1 in a million
One time
chance.
I can find them is the time I need them for a prop. It's actually just a Halloween costume, and I'm cosplaying as a big deal.
A big deal. I like that.
That's awesome.
I was thinking maybe you're going to be one of the Blues Brothers or something. Did I just date myself there, by the way? I don't know. Well, Carah, I want to welcome you to the program. And of course, Carah, we have a history. And actually, I have to admit, for a while there, I wasn't a big fan of Carah. And I actually repented of that when I saw you at Sunstone. And I actually want to get into that maybe later on in the conversation, because I just feel really bad that I misread you. And part of it was because by the time you were in the Mormon Stories orbit, my channel was starting to grow, and I wasn't as plugged into, like I tell people that I was getting that transition from content consumer to content creator, and therefore I wasn't able to consume as much as I was able to in the past. So I done wrong by you, and I want to thank you for forgiving me, and we'll talk some more about that. But Carah, welcome to the show.
Yeah, that's, you know what? Who's this new girl coming in, invading the Mormon Stories established space with John DeLynn, PhD? What does she have? A TikTok with a couple followers on it? What are her qualifications? I just happen to be a girl who's gone through some life experience. I have a couple kids, and I do my best to be nuanced and understand different perspectives and try to be funny and understanding, but I got opinions as well. So I can understand you. Sometimes you don't know what to do with me. So thanks for coming around. I hope your audience as well, if they're like, I don't like her. I hear that quite often from either people who are like legitimately in the church, and I come up on their page and they're like, don't like her, not one bit. And then about once a month since I started, I get somebody saying, didn't like you, but I see now. Yes. And also great points. And also here's some money. So.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. Woo. Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah. And I think even I was misread, especially, like, hey, I'm an evangelical, and people in the Mormon world, especially the ex-Mormon world, are like, get out. We don't have anything to do with you. And I think now people have gotten to understand my approach and what I'm doing as well. And one of the things about my audience is probably the most diverse audience of all the Mormon podcasts out there, because we have a large population of people who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who are very faithful. We include progressive members, very conservative. We have a large atheist following, because I was an atheist for about 12 years and have had some of the top atheists in the world come on the program as well. So I just really, and also my evangelical audience that's growing now too. And so, yeah, you can't be put in a box. I certainly can't. Cara certainly can't be put in a box either. You have created your own identity, which I think is really cool and interesting.
Well, whatever sells, whatever. No, just kidding.
So, well, it's funny. Off camera, you had said, I want to do some impromptu, like, ask me some hard questions. And it's
I've been in the mood to just like get to the nitty gritty of what do people, what are their problems? What do they want to know? And I'm trying to always do my best to,
so
I did that progressive video last week, and sometimes I don't even prepare that much, because I just am like, I know this stuff deep down there. Let's see what I can do with hard questions that are very difficult to wrap your brain around. So I'm always trying to challenge myself, learn from new perspectives, and just,
I think you and I are the same person, because I'm the same way. I don't ever really plan anything. I do most of my stuff as impromptu as well. But this is interesting. I'm talking to a pretty well-known, faithful Mormon podcaster, and I told him that I was going to be interviewing you. And the first question says, I don't know if you're going to ask this question. You probably won't. But why don't you ask her, is Carah Burrell a Marxist? Carah Burrell, are you a Marxist?
Oh,
well, that took a turn.
That took a turn. Am I a Marxist? I mean, short answer, no. I've talked a lot about my journey from being very conservative and, listening to Ben Shapiro, Gavin McInnes every day and being part of like very right-wing spheres, conservative spheres, working for a very conservative nonprofit as I left the church, going through this Jesus freak phase. And so my short answer is no, but I look at everything in the world in terms of like power dynamics and human rights. And it's hard to, again, put me in a box of what kind of label I would put on myself. So I like policies and overall philosophies that have to do with democracy in the workplace and giving the rights back to the workers. So there's like a equal distribution of power among people who usually do not have any, people on the margins, people in the working class. So my heart is for the people there. So I don't know. I follow a lot of different types of people and different thoughts, but that would have to be a short answer, no, but I could probably debate that for a long time. That's
Sure,
my
sure.
politics are different, but
Yeah.
that makes
Well,
sense. Like I said, everything comes down to power dynamics to me. Who has the power and who doesn't?
Well, and I can see that there's some validity to that. Of course, I would still, I guess I'm technically registered a Republican, but I certainly have transitioned from being far right conservative back in the day, political consultant, candidate for public office. Pretty much was very, very right wing, probably as conservative as you were in the past. And I just want you to maybe talk about, because we're talking about your faith journey and your transition, but it sounds to me there's also a parallel. And since we're talking about politics, we'll just go there. Maybe a parallel journey politically for you. I would say I'm I'm just kind of middle of the road libertarian at this point, classical liberal. But Cara, maybe just talk a little bit about your political transition.
All right. Well, right off the bat, I know that that's going to alienate some people, but to start off with where I've started and where I'm going, my heart is always with, like I said, understanding power dynamics. And if we're talking about the United States of America specifically, and how people, I view things in terms of how people gain access to power and what should be their basic human needs and civil rights. And so much of that is gate kept from a lot of people for, a certain minority where that power is centralized. And when I was more of a conservative, you look at like the Hollywood elites, or you look at like the Democratic elites or whatever. I think it's just like it's people who are the most greedy. And I was reading this book with my husband last month about how even billionaires' brains have literally changed over time, as that they don't feel the same types of empathy. And if you think about it in context of like our society as Homo sapiens growing, is that you have to have a certain level of empathy when you're interacting with one another. But certain people who are so removed from understanding the consequences of the ways that they siphon money from the system, and that I think over time you could say like our society has evolved into something that it never was kind of supposed to be. And my politics going from one to the other is kind of a recognizing of how the systems that are in place that take away this access to power for different marginalized groups and access to power for, you'd say, like the working class. I could go on and on. Why those systems are in place, who benefits from them, and the ways in which people sometimes vote against their own best interests because they have been fear-mongered into doing so. And there is dynamics in which come into play with, again, religious communities of the reasons why they vote against what I would say would be the best interest for the majority of people. A lot of fear again, and trying to build a kingdom of God for another time in another place, as opposed to it's like looked down on that we could build the kingdom of God like here on earth, that we could actually have certain policies that create the most amount of thriving for the most amount of people, but that's not the priority of a lot of people. So from where I started had a lot to do with assuming the best intent of my political party and the best intent of the people who proposed that they were Christians and that they did things that you assume that they have the best interest of the most amount of Americans and want to represent the Christ that they say that they follow, and assume that their ideas and policies that they want to implement are going to bring about the most amount of change. But through what I realized as like I said, I was very, very Christian, very conservative, and realizing that the ideas and the policies do not attack the problems from a systemic level with any type of realistic approach. And so, like, for instance, the nonprofit that I worked for was all about healing the family and keeping families together and adoption reform and all of those things like that, all those typical ways of like the ways that we heal America, less single moms, less people on welfare, more dads in the home. And while all of those things can be true, not taking into account the systemic actual different laws and policies that have made our society the way that it is, will never actually attack the problems that you want to attack. And so while I hate Joe Biden, I hate the Democratic Party for a lot of things, and I could name a couple things that I like that Joe Biden did. I could name a couple things that I like that Trump did. Overall, I don't look at terms in terms of things of political parties or anything like that. I don't have any allegiance one way or another. I don't have a label to it. I think the American people have certain policies that they vote overwhelmingly that they're in favor for, of, let's say, like Medicare for all, or different, child tax credits and things, and things that people are overwhelmingly in favor of, and looking at what resonates the most with the most amount of people and could be paid for if we were a country that actually cared about the things that we say we care about, but the policies in which we have implemented and the corruption and the lobbying and the donor funding of campaigns is so corrupt and will always keep perpetuating a system. I made it to my last sentence of my entire political thought, are perpetuating a system in which the status quo will kind of always be maintained, because the system itself is so corrupt that there isn't a whole lot that people can do to rise from the bottom to have access to that power, have access to those equal rights. And that's the journey from realizing the problems that I saw in our system are not going to be solved through prayer, religious means. They have to be solved by grassroots efforts, bottom-up efforts, and enough people demanding a change for the most amount of thriving for the most amount of people.
Well,
so,
that's quite a lot to unpack there. Very interesting. I guess I just have to do one quick follow-up question, because I'm going to keep you on your toes today, and Rebecca is too. So the question I have for you, Carah Burrell, are you woke?
Oh, you're so lucky to answer. Oh my gosh. Okay. I was literally down in LA visiting some friends last week, and we were having an entire discussion about all this stuff. And I wish that I had more caffeine in my system so I could talk a little bit faster and be a little bit more articulate. But my friend actually had me answer this question last week, and it was the first time I ever articulated it. So let's see if I can do it again. In short, I believe like Ron DeSantis's people in Florida have, they focus so much on attacking the woke left and those things. And again, that's a fear-mongering way of looking and othering other people as a way of kind of scapegoating who you want your side to be paying attention to, while you sneak out the back door with, all of the policies and things that people, if they were actually paying attention, they would realize are not in their best interest. But they're so they've got so many words and labels of what to fear and things like that. So in terms of being woke, I mean, I was the biggest anti-social justice warrior. I ran an anti-feminist account 4 years ago on Twitter. So trust me, I know every single argument you could ever ask for. But in terms of wokeness, what I view, especially on this side, let's say as a content creator, there's a lane of people that you're going to offend, and they're going to be always more woke than you. You know, you hear these arguments about like the like victim Olympics, you know, of intersectionality, of somebody will always be more victimized than you, and you're never going to be able to ever be as progressive as somebody else. And these people are so annoying, and they have just this us versus them, that if you're woke or you're not woke. What I will say about wokeness is, again, these labels are irrelevant. I always want to have discussions about what is the thing that we're talking about. And Ron DeSantis's people, when they had to like go to court to actually define what woke means, I believe they said like in their like legal papers that woke means that there are systemic injustices within America based on like certain factors that need to be addressed within our system. Something, it's like literally that sentence, something really simple that's like, well, yes, if you're going to define woke that way and call it a bad thing, you're calling approaching topics that are serious systemic injustices that keep people from accessing power based on characteristics that they cannot control. Then if you're going to define it that way, it's like, well, just people who that once they get down to the nitty-gritty, yeah, you're going to sound kind of stupid for trying to oppose that. Of course, there are systemic injustices in our society that need to be addressed. Are we stupid enough to think that in 2023 we've solved them all? But in like, you know, people in 1970 said they solved them all too. You know, it's like it's an ongoing progress. So what I will say about wokeism is what I was trying to describe to my friend was based around the idea that yes, there are so many people who are they can be loud and they can be annoying. And there's the Disney Corporation that's trying to, you know, put black mermaids and stuff. And there's a trans person on a Bud Light can. And like, isn't this annoying? Aren't they shoving it down our mouth, our throats and all that stuff? All of these arguments are so freaking irrelevant, because here's where my Marxism will come in. This is where these are such irrelevant conversations that are trying to keep working class people, trying to keep people in that dopamine spike, in that interest in fighting with things that are so surface level, when only things that matter, like for instance with Bud Light, like Anheuser-Busch still owns the other beers that people are going to go buy instead of Bud Light. Like overall, the boycotts that people actually care about are so manufactured and so just surface level, when what we would actually be talking about is like Vanguard Group and BlackRock and corporations and the 1% of people who own and manipulate the entire system that keep us from accessing power and justice in a highly corrupt country. That's, if you want to talk about my conservative political, like as my dad has bankrupted our family twice by trying to sell American flags. You can't ask for a more conservative, pro-Trump Mormon family than my family that I was raised in. And so going from like thinking that we are the best country in the world and we've never done anything wrong, to understanding that like in that freedom of speech in so many different ways, the best ideals of America are not always lived up to, but we do have a lot of good things. And so within that, we have a ton of corruption, and we can't just say that we love America and we're the best country in the world and all of that, while also ignoring that we have a country that has the media controlled by so many these like 1% of corporations. So when it comes to wokeism, where everyone's talking and fighting about the wrong thing, it should be a working class issue. It should be a linking arms with everybody else who is literally not in the 1% to realize we have everything freaking in common when it comes to what we have in common versus the people who control the majority of our policies, our food consumption, our rights as American citizens, the political and like the justice system. So it's about people of all kinds who are the marginalized, that we as working class people who do not have access to that type of power, we are all imperfect people who are trying to access power. And when I view people who could be annoying social justice warriors or get on people's case about not saying the right pronouns or not right words or whatever, I want to live in a society where we're moving towards the best, the most amount of people having access to power and live out their human rights and not be stopped, whether that's by a corrupt institution. That could be the, Mormon church, a corrupt institution, like for-profit prisons, like a corrupt institution. And the list goes on. It's about people who can link arms and realize that we have way less access to our human rights and our power than we should be having. And people throughout all history and time accessing that power, there's going to be some carnage, and it's not going to be in the most perfect and beautiful way. So if I was an anti-feminist and I used to argue, well, these suffragettes, when they're trying to access their voting rights, why are they blowing up buildings? Doesn't that prove or discredit their movement? It's like within any different movement trying to access their ideals that for the most part are good ideals, they're going to have some carnage. They're going to have people on the fringes. And I think that goes to everything about what's going on with Israel and Hamas. That can go back to Mormon history. To paint with a broad brush is doing a disservice to the actual things and ideas that I hope as a society that we all want to implement. And so wokeism, while it can be something that, Ben Shapiro or whatever can freaking focus on for an hour show, it's a distraction, and it's not actually at the heart and the substance of what will actually reform our society and make, again, help people access that power. It's entertainment, it's othering, it's a put down of other people. But at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, what are they actually trying to achieve? And are those ideals something that while it may be imperfect, what kind of ideals do I want to have? So if you're a libertarian, you're the type of libertarian who's like the type of access to power that I hope trans people have. Well, it might be a movement that's imperfect, and it has people on the fringes, and it has people that are trying to gain access in society. Overall, do you want trans people to be able to transition as adults, or do you not? And that's the discussion we should be having, instead of like, I just hate that they're doing this, or I just hate that I'm forced to say pronouns. We can have those discussions along the way if we decide what type of human rights are actually supposed within our inherent human beingness.
Okay, so
that's me.
This is very fascinating. Of course, I'm libertarian-ish. I also am a Christian anarchist. So some of the stuff that you're saying does resonate with me. It reminds me, and of course, I want to get you in this discussion too, Rebecca, but it reminds me of something that's very Utah-based, is that in the 80s and 90s, they would have these flag burning amendments to ban flag burning, because the Supreme Court had ruled that flag burning is constitutionally protected. So so this is what happened. Orrin Hatch, every Senate session, would sponsor a bill to ban flag burning, and they would use it to basically run against Democrats and liberals who are against this amendment. So and so's in favor of flag burning. But what was so fascinating about it is that Bob Bennett was against that amendment. And so they were purely politically, and they would always fall like 1 or 2 votes short of passing it. And it always was Bob Bennett often was the one that, because he always voted against it. So this is how cynical this whole thing was. They knew there was no way they could pass this. They also knew that Bob Bennett was always going to vote against this amendment, but they did this so that they could then run campaign commercials against Democrats and liberal Republicans as well, to go after them. And so that gives you an example of using like a distraction, the flag burning amendment, and then think of all the other things that were going on in our country, because this was also the time when the Democrat Party decided to sell their soul to the corporations through Bill Clinton. And so they became a corporatist party, just like the Republican Party has. So you're seeing this, but they use the flag burning was a distraction from a lot of other things that are going on. What do you say to that, Cara? And isn't it interesting? It was the 2 Utah senators that were kind of playing this game.
Yeah. All I have to say is just a short repeat of my long rant. It's distract people with things that hit to the core of their identity, while you can sneak in the back door, or you can argue against just things that are not as substantial. You want me to say the most controversial thing I'll ever say?
Sure.
Okay. If I had to choose between a politician who said, I'm going to run on a campaign of, I want to have redistribution from the 1%. I want Medicare for all. I want I want just seriously go item by item of not what I think is the most popular, what I think the American people think is the most popular policies that will serve the most amount of people and not the corporations. Okay. If go policy by policy, let's get 10 in there. And they say, and also once a year, I'm going to burn the American flag. Freaking make him the president of the United States. It is so irrelevant. The things that people hold up as sacred, while there are people who are dying in hospitals and people who are dying when they're going to fight wars for, you know, the military industrial complex for oil. There's people who are the top bankruptcy in America is from like medical debt. The basic human rights of Americans are always like superseded by other certain ideals of what patriotism looks like or whatever. F that. Like what patriotism looks like is actually taking care of your own people. So that's how I would respond to that.
Oh, okay, very good. Now, I also wanted to show the audience that I am wearing the Jesus shirt because I wanted to honor the Jesus freak stage that Carah Burrell went through. And I want to talk to you about Jesus later in this conversation. But I also want to bring Rebecca in here because I'm sure you've got a lot of, hey, she said she wants hard-hitting questions. I'd say hard hit away, Rebecca.
There it is. Bring it on. Well, I'm not woke at all. I'm actually technically a baby boomer. I missed the mark by like 3 months. I really am. So
You're
not
a baby
woke
boomer?
whatsoever. I am a baby boomer. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, I am. So, and proud of it. There you go. Maybe I need to get a t-shirt. Well, in our discussion here, I right now find myself really enmeshed and embroiled in Utah church politics. If you know what I'm talking about. On my podcast, Mormonish, we're dealing with the citizens that are trying to suggest that the Heber Valley Temple be relocated to a place that isn't, so prominent. It's so big. There's a lot of problems, a lot of issues, traffic, water, all kinds of things. Also dealing with Cody, Wyoming, with a similar situation with their temple. So I guess my question for Cara would be, through the lens of Mormonism, everything that you've just said, in a microcosm in Utah, how do you see that all playing out with the predominant religion and politics? I've learned a lot just working with these citizens groups that are trying to basically get a fair shake and be heard. And it's been very eye-opening to me. Do you have any thoughts on that? Just politics in Utah, that specific niche there.
Well, starting strong with Sean Reyes is absolutely going down and is one of the most corrupt politicians ever. And it just so happens that
That's
Tim
strong.
Ballard's sexual deviancy is the thing that is going to link him. And I have no doubt that in the coming months and years, a lot of corruption within Utah is going to be exposed, with especially people like we've seen with Tim Ballard portraying a certain happy family man Mormon image. Sean Reyes is no different. There's so much I could say on this subject, and I'll be talking about the things that informants have leaked to me that I had to take like an entire day off just to cry when I realized how little access to power some people in our state, especially, I would say, now that I know certain details and what can happen, who can be thrown in jail on trumped up charges, and the amount of, again, that surface level. If he looks like us, he says the right things, he participates in church, that must mean he couldn't be possibly, that's my whole point with Tim Ballard, right? It's like, well, if they're a part of our in-group, they could possibly be as corrupt as somebody who's in the out-group. And like, that's where I'm like, political, religious or not, people of all shapes and sizes are capable of doing some insane, corrupt, lying manipulation for their own ego and their own greed and their own self-aggrandizement. And so baseline, the way I view Utah politics is so much through the lens of people being able to prop up ideals that resonate with their voter base, that have to do with just ideals. It has that you want somebody who's this family man, you want somebody who is conservative in the same ways that you are, but behind back doors, it's in the best interest of who's donating to their campaign and who's keeping them in office. You hear all the time about the second that people get into office. I think it was who's that woman who's the Haitian, she is senator from like Saratoga Springs. Her name's not coming to me right now.
Yeah, it's now I can't think of it either, but yeah. Oh, Mia.
Mia Love.
Is that who you're thinking of? Yeah.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody this week who was helping her with her campaign. And just the literal first day that she gets elected, it's back to fundraising and going back to people for money again when they haven't done a freaking thing yet, because that's the way our system works. It's a continual pipeline of money and power without actually asking for the substance and fulfilling the promises that you have to your constituents, right? And so with all of that being said, in terms of like the temples and things that are being built and the actual people within the cities and things who are trying to vote against it and trying to have their rights be heard, there's really no space, in my opinion, overall, generally, with the power and corruption of the Utah politicians, as well as the power and corruption of the Mormon church. When those are working hand in hand, you are asking for the most insanely corrupt state in our union. And I do not say that to be hyperbolic. The things since the Tim Ballard thing that have come out that certain informants have come to me and shown me evidence of, you have to understand what I'm saying here. You cannot have this Zion state that we're asking for if it's based on Brigham Young being the governor for 40 years, being in a literal like theocracy. If that's how the state is even started with Brigham Young playing the prophet and the governor, it is not that far of a stretch of an imagination to realize how little has changed since then.
You know, it is fascinating, folks. And of course, I have a large audience of people who are faithful members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And you're going to probably push back on me for having Cara on. But I want to say, just like I have some of the leading atheists and critics of the church on my program, Aaron Robb, Michael Shermer, John DeLynn, Sandra Tanner, Dan, well, I wouldn't say Dan Vogel, but I mean, some view him as a critic, but he's a real legit historian, of course, too. And of course, I have Richard Bushman on. I have some Rod Meldrum on. I have all different types of people. All voices are heard here on this channel. But I also think that I'm also doing a public service to faithful Mormons who probably aren't ever going to watch NuanceHoe, aren't going to probably ever watch Cara's program. But I think it's important that you hear what she's saying, because this is what's being said out there. And you need to at least have a full understanding of the complete picture of some of the criticisms of the church. Because if you're blind to that, then you will be blindsided by things. I think it's really important to hear all the different perspectives and what people bring to the table. And so, Cara, I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts, because they're very provocative and very controversial. But again, I'm not afraid. I don't shy away from any of that stuff, as we all know. I was doing, heck, Rebecca, we were doing church finances last year before anybody else was doing it on the channel. Anybody else was doing it, right? So the reality is that I was never afraid to do controversy at all on this channel. I know that my channel has gotten a lot more faithful in the last year, which I'm honored by. I think it's really awesome. But I also think it's important that Cara's voice is heard, because I think you're one of the most important voices right now in the Mormon podcast world. So I did want to ask a little bit about Tim Ballard, because you've been doing a lot of work. Now, just folks, so you know, of course, a few weeks ago, I put out that episode where I invited Tim Ballard to come on my show. I know that he is probably aware of that, because I'm tied into some people that are still have been close to Tim. And I'm still working. I'm talking to some people. I am talking to some people about this, because I do feel like at some point I'm going to probably do something on Tim Ballard as well. And I'm also going to have people on who are still will defend the work of Operation Underground, that they do say that there was some good that they did. And I think that's an important thing to hear as well. But I wanted to hear from you, Cara. You've been doing a lot of work on Tim Ballard, and were you shocked? It sounds to me like you even did not expect to uncover the things that you uncovered once you were starting to get information. Is that correct?
Yeah, let me set it up this way. And also, I just wanted to, if any faithful, Latter-day Saints are still watching, Cara the NuanceHoe loves you, trust me. So I'm not saying any of the things that I'm saying to be provocative or whatever. This is probably the most straightforward you will ever hear my opinions that are, outside of things religious being spoken online. So I'm not usually this straightforward. But again, I do view things in terms of power and control. And I always come back to the ideas of different systems in which your autonomy is outsourced and is used and abused, and what it's like to take back that power. And that's, to me, like the Mormon to ex-Mormon experience, if you try to do it right. But in linking that with politics, or linking that in with Tim Ballard, the women in which so much of what I would call like their grooming by Tim Ballard is also a grooming within the Mormon system that does already have these powers in place where your autonomy and your access to realizing when things are really red flags that should be spoken of sooner, but you're already kind of primed in the system to think that men outside of your power, that you have kind of given them that power. It's pretty much taken from you from birth, I would say, if you're raised in the church, that they speak for God, that you don't. And so in regards to the women that Tim Ballard has allegedly abused and sexually exploited with this couple's ruse idea, again, there's a system in which that's already in place that has groomed women to believe that if Tim Ballard says that this is what's necessary to save the kids, they deny their own instincts that it's wrong because of his gender, his position in the church. And the reasons that he is even in those positions have a lot to do with, you know, the varying equality that people speak up in society already. And so if you remember the women who said, like, we're very aware of the false accusations after the Me Too movement, blah, blah, blah. You're talking, Carah Burrell over here used to be the biggest anti-feminist on the planet. So trust me, I understand that there are a lot of people who do make false accusations. But on this side of where I sit, you know, I have somebody who made false accusations against me for sexual harassment that is an ongoing, like, legal problem that me and some other friends are having to deal with. So I've been on the other side of that. I understand that completely. But I think getting inside the mind of these women, they probably had similar politics to Tim Ballard, to people that are very conservative LDS people. And then when the time comes in which, you know, they need to be heard, their own side is not hearing them out. And again, that just comes from this priming over a long lifetime of people who are not used to actually believing the stories of women, that if they have a choice, it's the priesthood power, it's the men that are in charge. And what does that do? It creates this circle and this loop of you know, I wouldn't call it an echo chamber. That's not exactly what I'm trying to go for in this analogy, but this loop of people only being able to access power if they stay within this orthodoxy, if they keep pressing the right buttons. And when you step outside of that and you say, hey, wait, I've been abused in the system time and time again, whether it's in the LDS church, it can be in, you know, Fox News and plenty of different corporations all across the board. It's this issue and this problem of when something is going wrong and people who want to access more power, they will be able to stay in that channel if they deny the issues of people who have none. They deny that if they say those issues do not exist for you, and they say, you're making it up, this is a you problem, this is an institutional, and it's this convenient scapegoat from Mormonism to so many things beyond that I take issue with. Again, it's people who are trying to access power, greed, self-aggrandizement, ego, things that they think will be fulfilling to them, when in actuality, the only things that I think are long-term fulfillment is to do what Jesus Christ said, is to leave the 99, to go after the one, to mourn with those that mourn, to listen, to look for the evidence, and to help rise up people who are just trying to access the power that has been taken away from them, that allowed for these things to even happen in the first place. So that is my first piece on Tim Ballard, but I can keep going for like 5 hours. That's my overall how I view the entire thing from a 10,000 foot view, I guess.
Sure. Rebecca, why don't you chime in?
It just made me think of what my Mormonish co-host Landon said as we've done episodes and discussed the situation. He said these women were groomed first by their religion and then manipulated and groomed later by Tim Ballard. But yeah, they definitely had the background to make everything fall into place as far as what Tim was doing. So I think a lot of people see that. And I think a question I might ask Cara, sorry. I think a question that I might ask is what is the church's role, responsibility? What would you say? I mean, I look at other things that are happening. Just the story in the news just a few days ago that's ongoing right now, where there's a family, end of times, end of days. They've taken some family members against their will. We think, you know, they're headed for a tent city. You see this all the time. This idea of this end of days, apocalyptic view that Tim Ballard kind of shared, visions, revelations, and you see Skousen, you see Gileadi, you see Julie Rowe, you see Tom Harrison, you see the church being silent about this. They don't ever really come out and say, this is not great, guys. This could lead to something big and not great. Do you see any responsibility in that? Would you hold them accountable for not speaking out, for creating the monster, I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, I could actually read from a Facebook page that I found last night, because the NuanceHoe wants to be able to understand all the different types of perspectives. And so there's this like anti-visions of glory pro LDS Facebook page that I was looking at last night. And I might be wrong on this, but I think it's run by Kimberly something or other, who also is part of like the Rod Meldrum clan, Hannah Stoddard, Joseph Smith Foundation clan. And so
Kimberly
I could
Watson
be wrong
Clark?
on that.
Is it Kimberly Watson Clark?
It might be. I think she might run that page, is what I was inferring from it, but I could be wrong. So all I'm trying to say is I'm trying to get at the understand people who are within the church, who are, as faithful gets, and believing in Joseph Smith and the prophets and so forth, but understand what is dangerous about this faction, about the Visions of Glory faction, about the Lori Vallow crimes and so forth. And they reshared John Dehlin and Mormon Stories video that he did with like Laura and the other people that were talking about Visions of Glory. And they're like, I never want to talk about, reshare something from an apostate, but I will share this. And the only problem that they really had with it was that like, hey, the church has come out and said, we don't like any of this. And I think it was maybe 2 years ago when they updated the church handbook and said that energy healing and things of that nature are forbidden and dangerous or something. And the Facebook page was trying to point out that like the church has done everything that they can. It's just, crazy people in this offshoot who are doing this stuff. John Dehlin, don't paint with a broad brush that like the church just allows this and knows that it's going on. They're doing everything within their power. And so, I appreciate that there are Mormons out there who are trying to make a distinction of like, we believe in the church, we don't like this. I see these different lanes and boxes that some people are trying to put down. What is the actual truth of the matter here? It's that we have a church that I've been in this space for a long time. There are two things that I know. The church will tell you what it believes in, not by what you hear at General Conference, not by what it's in its handbook and its policies. It's where it spends its money with its lawyers, and it's where it spends its time with its PR releases and trying to have the best perceptions that it possibly can. And so distancing itself from Tim Ballard, distancing itself from anything to do with like Lori and Chad, right? So the church will do the minimal amount that it takes to just look like they're distancing themselves and have this deniability going on. But where I would say what its responsibility, to get to your question, is that I'm always asking the church to make good on what the proposition is that you say that you are. Mouthpieces of God, special witnesses for Jesus Christ. If all of those things are true and things, but there are people within your religion that are going so astray to the point that they murder people based on the buffet of your beliefs. Because that's the thing. It's not, I would never in a million years say that anybody of any religion is always going to act one way, even like the majority of the time. I wouldn't say that about like Muslims. I wouldn't say that about Jehovah's Witnesses. I wouldn't say that about the people in the LDS church, as I've spoken with Ben Park on my podcast a couple of weeks ago about this Tim Ballard type of possible schism and everything, is that Ben Park does some fantastic job explaining the ways that Mormons are so able to pick and choose because we have such a diverse religion that has changed so much over time. So you can get visions of glory. You can squeeze that type of ideology out of the church. It's from what you just have kind of here with personal revelation. You can squeeze out and be a Mormon, believe in the revelations of the prophets, and you can find a way to get this type of book and this ideology and these powers and this healing and these visions. You can get from that point A to like point Z from Mormonism. You can get from point to point like very progressive Mormon within Mormonism if you focus in on different things. And so the church, like I was going back to saying, having a responsibility in this is as being who that they say that they are, they need to be a lot more clear from the pulpit, from every institution. No, it's the reasons they won't is because it's a PR hassle, because it's alienating and it's exposing, the spiders and the ghosts in the basement that they don't want to. And so people will keep getting hurt. People will keep, being murdered and kidnapped and things if they are not more specific about what the doctrines are and what the doctrines aren't, and making a clear line about how you participate as a faithful member and how you don't. But like I said, that's what I would say their responsibility is, to be extremely explicit on what it means to follow the gospel. And it's not as picky and choosy as people who have inclinations towards murdering their zombie kids might think that it is. So straightforward from the pulpit, as expressly as possible, would be their responsibility. It will never come, but that's what I would say.
So this
it
is
will never happen. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. This is a very explosive episode. And I wanted to say before we continue on, I just want to make sure that we're good on time here, because you said you're under the gun and we've done a little over about an hour here. There's a few other things I'd like us to tackle. How's your time? I want to be respectful of your time, Cara.
I got maybe 15 more minutes.
Okay. Rebecca, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think Deseret Book is a big part of that, right? A lot of these things, these ideas, they're in Deseret Book till they're pulled out. But I think what you said, it will never happen. I believe it will never happen either, because I see two sort of growing factions in Mormonism. I see what we just described, the more fundamental apocalyptic. And then I see Faith Matters Restore. I see this new kind of extremely progressive Mormon, and I see them very much moving away from each other. So here's the church. Who are they going to talk to? What are they going to say that's going to alienate one side and not the other? And I know that you just did an episode on Faith Matters Restored. I would love to hear your opinion on that growing movement within the church. I think a lot of us are talking about that. It's very interesting.
And can I just chime in on that too? Because I want to relay a story that's already been publicly told, and I want to kind of just give you a real world example. So a few years ago, my friend Rick Bennett of Gospel Tangents was talking with Terrell Givens, and basically Terrell was like, "Hey, don't be afraid to be bold. Let's kind of do our thing and just assert ourselves and feel free. You have the freedom to do this, Rick, to be more progressive in your approach." So Rick decided that he was going to do a Sunday school lesson where he taught from a parallel Bible. So he was quoting versions that were non-KJV, right? And so, although the Living Bible says this, or the new NIV says this, that was the last Sunday school class that Rick Bennett ever taught in his ward. He was removed. So this is the most interesting thing to me, is that we have these people who are faith matters, right? And they're trying to present a type of progressive Mormonism. Then I was like, you guys are describing something that I don't actually see that it exists. I'm not trying to be critique. I'm just kind of, I call balls and strikes. That's what I do. But there seems to be this church that they're creating that doesn't exist except in their own minds. And when it's tried to be applied in the real world, they get slapped down really, really fast.
So you want me to tackle that big old question? And we still have to leave time for my Jesus freak phase too.
Oh my gosh.
And Rod Meldrum. I got to ask you about Rod Meldrum. We might have to make this a two-part.
Oh my goodness. Two-part.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I need to make sure that we define what we're talking about here, because like I said in the podcast that I did a couple of days ago about this Faith Matters Restore conference, I just want to quickly state that there's two different ways to use the word progressive when we're talking about progressive Mormons. And one would be the normal, like, progressive policies, people who believe in like women's reproductive rights and LGBTQ rights and things like that. And then also we're talking about Rod Meldrum and Hannah Stoddard and Kimberly. They belong to what's called the traditionalist, they call themselves, faction of the LDS church that doesn't believe that Joseph Smith used a rock and a hat to restore the church. That is just a progressive historian lie. They don't believe in a lot of the things that, Richard Bushman would teach, that they are progressive historians who are teaching corrupted, what they view as like Marxist versions, because, Leonard Arrington voted for FDR and therefore he's a socialist. Therefore he's a he's a Carah whore. Therefore, how could he possibly teach anything true? Anything we get from him, Richard Bushman, that is all corrupted. We need to stick with the traditionalist view. Basically, Joseph Smith has never done anything wrong. Okay. I'm generalizing here. So I'm saying there's the progressive one of the things that we incorporate in our teachings about what the church is now the progressive narrative that has been adapted, whereas the version of Mormonism 50 years ago would be unrecognizable from what's taught in a seminary class, or, not completely unrecognizable. What I'm saying is the things in which we incorporate and actually interact with the facts of history are just very different because of progressive historians, and then also because of trying to have more inclusion for the more progressive kind of political and social views on the day. So I think I just always like to make sure that people understand that the way, at least that I view the more progressive overall wing of the church, Faith Matters and things, they're trying to do those two words, are the two meanings are kind of interchangeable. Does that make sense? So I don't want to think, when people think progressive, they think it's just a bunch of liberals in here. They just want gay weddings all the time. I was like, there's a lot of diversity in what it means to even be progressive. And that can be just talking about the history and has nothing to do with, the things that are more left for political spheres. Makes sense? Okay. So your question had to do with what I think of this schism because of the church. Remind me of your question again, or what exactly you wanted to.
It was just sort of, we had just talked about the more traditional or fundamental side of Mormonism, and now we see this other side where the progressive, as you define it, and what's in the middle. Schism, that's a very interesting word, because people are living different religions, and exactly like you described, my parents, they live in 80s church. Some of the things they hear today, they can't understand it. They don't think it's even coming from their church, because it's completely opposite of what they heard. So I guess I just wanted I think you pretty much answered it. I just wanted your opinion on this kind of new movement, and maybe where you see it happening, where I see them going like this, completely moving apart. Who's left in the middle? I don't know. Is there a middle? I'm not sure. And who can you even address from conference? Probably no one.
Well, the title of the video that I did was, I think I named it like, selling community and Christ, the progressive Mormons approach, and watching a lot of the Faith Matters stuff and reporting, for my YouTube channel on what this entire conference was about. The things that I did get out of it mostly, and their YouTube videos, is a focus on Jesus Christ and a focus on community, and the best way to become like Christ, to have these rough stones be able to smooth each other, from jagged rocks to smooth stones, is to bump up against each other. And that through that system, you're close enough to people who can hurt you, but then you can also serve them and be able to be more like Christ in the way that you can then, just like what you would hope the church would be, is that idea of a hospital for the broken and for the sick, instead of people who come perfected. And so my problem with the progressive faction as it is in this Faith Matters thing, the things that they're saying, they all pique something within our consciousness that makes us say like, oh, I want that. Yeah. You understand that as a Homo sapien, you understand that we have to live around other people and they're going to hurt you. But what they're actually ignoring are the power structures. Sorry, this is going to be titled Carah Burrell and her problems with power structures, is what so many progressive Mormons are, in my opinion, completely sidestepping in favor of something completely different that doesn't exist in the church. What they're actually not interacting with is the power structure of the LDS church as it exists right now. Is your bishop and your stake president, are they being smoothed and changed by interacting with people that are close enough to them to hurt them? Hell no. It's people within these power structures who are able to speak on behalf of God, that you are convinced as a Latter-day Saint that this person speaks for God in ways that you cannot access. That is part of the proposition of Mormonism, is that you follow the prophet, and if you disagree with him, you are now on the outs with God. And the type of poison that you feel like you are and incapable of actually accessing that power to this God by yourself, that it needs to come through all these outsourced places that provide so much shame. It's this entire system of outsourcing things through people who are by definition in priesthood leadership above you. And so as nice as it is to say that like you just come to church because church is where you get community, it's where we help each other and smooth each other. And, you know, Patrick Mason is in this video talking about like, well, yes, you can worship God anywhere and it could be in the forest, whatever. I think the best way to worship is with a group of believers or things like that, or people who will stretch you. At the end of the day, as nice as it sounds, we live in a society where that is very possible, and you can have a diverse amount of beliefs. But in the Mormon church, if you're saying that you go to the LDS church, and that is a place where different ideas in Sunday school or anything broadly in the church is going to be accepted, and we will smooth each other over, that is somebody who has very wishful thinking about what the church is as opposed to what it actually is. So it's very wishful thinking and misunderstanding of the power dynamics as they are.
Fascinating. Now we only have a few minutes left here, and I really don't think we can do Jesus or Rod Meldrum justice in that short of a period of time. And I do have quite a few more questions that I would like to ask you, but I wanted to actually kind of just turn the table a little bit on this. And by the way, Cara's going to have us on her program too. And actually, Cara, I would even invite you to do a one-on-one with me, and we could turn the tables and you could just start asking me prodding questions. I love this kind of stuff. I did it with John DeLynn, and you can push me all you want. But I wanted to ask you, just as an outside, now that you are where you're at, and you weren't from being like pretty like right-wing conservative to now obviously a more progressive in your orientation, and you have also left the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You also went through a phase where you went through your Jesus phase, which I'd actually like to explore that in a future episode. But I want to ask you, is there something about your past, being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where you could say, this is something good that the church did in my life? There was something, maybe take something positive you could actually say about the church that it actually was good for you in your life, or has been helpful to you even to this day. Is there something you could think of? I'm just really curious.
Constantly. Yeah. 100%. You guys I hope your audience understands. Like, I am the least anti-Mormon you could probably ask for, to be honest. If you watch the video on my YouTube channel, my very first one of this podcast I started called Why I Left, it is literally me going through in the childhood abuse that I went through and my understanding of who this God was. And if the wounds of so many people who do gravitate towards religion, for example, as a coping mechanism, and I think we all have different coping mechanisms, and I know it's going to sound offensive, but the things that you gravitate towards in religion to fill the holes in you that are sometimes there since childhood, and you can manufacture whatever kind of God fills those holes based on your conditioning. And so for me, I had nothing but pretty good conditioning about who this Jesus Christ figure was at the center of Mormonism. So I had as good of a time in Mormonism as anyone could really ask for, because the God that I was worshiping was a very forgiving and understanding God who wasn't, going to condemn me and like fill me with any kind of shame because I was masturbating because of my childhood abuse. My God understood the conditions in which he put me in and what my responsibilities were and what kind of promises and covenants I was personally making with him as a personal relationship with God. And so, as you can see, once you go from that type of childhood, teenage years of a very beautiful relationship with I'd say the best ideals of Jesus Christ that you could possibly lift, and leaving a lot of the other judgment oriented ones, understanding that God wanted the best for me. It wasn't one of those, well, if God loves you so much, are you just going to go out and sin a bunch because he'll forgive you? It's the best intentions of what I hope most religious people are. It's that idea that God loves me so much that he died for me. He loves me completely. And out of respect for that loving relationship that I'm in with him, I am going to respect that with the way that I act and speak and stay in this type of covenant with him, because with great responsibility, with great power comes great responsibility. And I have a responsibility to maintain this covenant with God. So you can see with that type of teenage childhood relationship with Jesus Christ, then going through the LDS temple and realizing that handshakes are a part of this, and changing clothes, and then everything within my relationship with Jesus Christ having to be gate kept by this institution now. And that in and of itself is what started a lot of the things that I talk about right now. It's this removal of this access to power. The idea is that these things are only available within people who check these certain boxes, who are in this certain clothes, who have this quiet reverence in the ways in which all these other men in power have conditioned us to believe is holy and of God, when there's loud laughter that you swear against, or I mean, that you covenant against in the temple, and everything realizing that it had to do with maintaining the power and control of these people, when my access to this spirit and this beauty was always in spite of these people and not because of them, right? And so my 7-year kind of Jesus freak phase that happened there in my mid-20s is like some of the happiest, most service-oriented pieces of my life, because I already had this good foundational relationship with the type of God that I worshiped. And I just kind of used Mormonism in and of itself as a way to express that, going back to kind of the rant that I went on about progressive Mormons. It's like, you can express how you receive love from God, and then you give that to your community and your ward members. People can do that all day, but the question is, just because it's good and it's useful and it's helpful, but is it actually true? Or the truth claims of Mormonism that do take away 10% of your income, that do fill you with fear about your children not being with you in the eternities, are the truth claims of Mormonism actually something that I can substantiate, and realizing that they cannot be. So what do I do now with that relationship? So with all that being said, of course, I had amazing experiences within Mormonism, because how could I not? That is the God that I worshiped, who cared so much about me and brought me out of so many different depressions, and I felt like I had so many different miracles in my life. I had a fantastic ward growing up, and all I saw were just the good fruits of this gospel that I loved. Like, I was not the type of person who ever in any way, shape, or form left the church because I was too progressive, or because I had a bad experience, or I was blaming something on a leader. I left simply because I realized it's a not true thing. Sometimes things are just not true things. Relationships you have to leave. You realize, I thought this person was one way. Turns out that's a not true thing. The church is just, it's a not true thing as I thought it was. But the experiences that I had, of course, they guided and led so many wonderful things within my life. Does that make Joseph Smith a prophet? Absolutely not. Does that make Russell M. Nelson a prophet? Absolutely not, because people in all different systems can have these experiences, and you can pick and choose what you focus on. And hopefully people notice that I'm actually quite a positive person, even though I've been like kind of ranty in this. I always look for the best in people. I look at people who are doing the best with their genetics and their conditioning, and try to see the best in people. So I could probably have a good experience in a lot of different religions. And just so happens I was born in Mormonism. So.
Wow. Fantastic. What a great conversation we had today. And thank you so much for taking your time to share this really important aspect of your life that you probably haven't told a whole lot of people. I'm really glad to see this side of you. And like I said, I misjudged you. And next episode, folks, we're going to talk about Rob Meldrum. We're going to talk more about Jesus. I really find your faith journey to be truly fascinating, and actually see a lot of parallels in my life as well. So I think we'll have a great conversation. I'm also looking forward to us coming on your program. So look out for that, folks. I'm also already have an idea of a few people who probably want to come on and push back on you, which is what this program's all about, is to be able to have all the different voices come on this program. But Cara, excuse me. I said
Cara and Burrell. Carell.
Yeah, Carell. I like that. I'm gonna start calling her Carell. I want to thank you so much for coming on the program today.
Absolutely. Yeah, no problem. And I just wanted to mention too, I have been itching to, I wouldn't say debate somebody. I don't want to debate, but I do like to have conversations where there's pushback, and we can meet in the middle and say where we agree on things and where we don't agree. And so I'm at the point now where I think I learn the most when I talk to people that I don't agree with, and I have to substantiate what my assumptions are in the back of my head, and then push them into words that might be imperfectly expressed. But I would say, if anyone wants to reach out, who, has a platform or not, but wants to push back on these ideas, especially as it relates to the church being true, somebody who's a faithful LDS person who would want to push back, I would love to bring anybody on my podcast who wants to hash that stuff out. So
love it. Well, just keep in mind, of course, I think, folks, all you need to do is watch my episode with Jacob Hansen and Greg and Bill Bennett, right? Or is it Jim Bennett? Jim Bennett, right?
Jim Bennett.
Yes. Yeah, Jim Bennett. I'm sorry. Jim Bennett and Jacob Hassan, that was probably Rebecca even says probably the most explosive podcast in years. Probably maybe the most explosive since the Rod Meldrum meltdown situation that we had, which we'll touch base on that as well. Rebecca, thanks for coming on the show today as my co-host.
Yeah, it was really fun. And what I love about both of you guys is that you do choose to take counsel and to listen from two people who do not believe as you do. And you can learn so much from that and you can grow from that. And both of you do that. So I love it.
All right, folks. So what'd you think? I think this was a great episode. Just a reminder, don't forget, MormonBookReviews.com is our merch store where we have hot chocolate mugs. We have t-shirts. We have all sorts of things. For those of you who'd like to financially support us, we have links on Venmo, as well as on PayPal, as well as Patreon. There'll be links there. We'll have links to Carah Burrell's. We didn't even talk about your podcast hardly. We want to ask you about like what do you got planned and all these wonderful things. You can tell us all about NuanceHoe.
I have a son planned.
and all right, that's awesome.
Oh, hold on, I got a
folks.
Mario coming in the room right now.
Okay,
like
there
it's time to go. It's Halloween. Oh my goodness!
Don't forget.
Look,
he's Mario.
Oh, he's so cute.
That is so awesome. Happy Halloween.
No, he's too cute.
Cool.
He's here to humanize me. I just ranted like a apparent Marxist for an hour. So,
well, that's what
costume is so cute.
And that M stands for Marxist, right? Isn't that what the little M?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Steve. Got a little Marxist going here. So he.
So Callahan, can you say opium of the masses? Just kidding.
She's like, yes.
Wow, this was great. Well, folks, thanks again. Remember, the most important thing is this. Remember, all the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.